Great. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to this technical assistance session for the CanRenew Community Restoration Grant FY 2026 RFP. This is not where you're meant to be. Stick around. You might still have fun. Anyways, my name is Heather Dukeshire. My pronouns are they and them. I'm here representing the Office of Cannabis Management's Division of Social Equity. So let's see. So just a little bit about who we are as OCM and the Division of Social Equity before we jump right into the RFP and any questions or comments you might have, which as a bit of housekeeping, which I forgot to mention. So the chat is turned off, but the Q&A option is available for your questions that we will, if we do not get to answering them today, we will follow up with answers. Please also note that we do have an FAQ list on our website. Anyways, back to our scheduled programming. So per Minnesota statute, OCM, the Office of Cannabis Management, was established to promote public health, safety, and welfare, to eliminate the illicit demand and meet consumer demand, foster a sustainable craft cannabis industry, and most relevant to why we're here today, to prioritize growth in communities impacted by cannabis prohibition. So within OCM, we work in the Division of Social Equity, which what we do is promote development, stability, and safety in those communities that have experienced a disproportionate negative impact from cannabis prohibition and usage. Okay. That's a little overview, but what we do is that we engage with and we represent the communities. We administer grants, so including the one we're talking about today, CanRenew Community Restoration Grant, as well as the CanGrow Farmer Training and Farmer Loan Grants. Additionally, we investigate and resolve complaints. We review and approve licensing transfers for social equity classified businesses, review petitions for disqualifying offense variances, report to OCM leadership on the status of complaints and social equity in the cannabis industry, and report to the legislature about grants. All right, that's who we are. And why we're here today is to talk about CanRenew. So these community restoration grants are competitive grants that are awarded to organizations investing in communities with residents who qualify as social equity applicants. One thing I always like to point out is that the projects that we fund are not limited to those that relate to cannabis. Okay, we're going to dive into some definitions about what exactly we are talking about here. So in that definition of what that grant is, I was mentioned a social equity applicant. So who that is includes individuals who have been adversely affected by previous cannabis enforcement. And so that includes folks living in heavily policed communities, people and relatives of people who have faced cannabis-related legal actions, military service members affected by cannabis-related infractions, as well as residents of low-income areas with long-term presence of over 5 years. If you're a policy nerd and you want more details, there's a QR code if you want to look at those statutes in more detail. All right, so a couple more definitions. So we are talking about community investment. So that means that projects or programs that are going to improve community life. And so that can include things like economic development, health improvement, violence prevention, youth programs, or legal aid, or other things. We are always open to projects that are outside of that, but still resolve and address the purpose of the grant. Again, they do. Eligible. So we are talking social equity at previous. and an eligible organization equity applicant that includes nonprofits, governments, private business partnerships. Right. So about this so we
Heather,
yes.
I am having a hard
I
time.
think they're having trouble hearing, and I
I'm
am
having.
too.
Okay.
Oh no. Okay, hold on. Right. Is this any better for folks?
Yes, that's much better, Heather.
Great.
I think you should probably go back a slide because I didn't hear anything you said in the previous slide.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Great.
Thank you.
Shout out to my colleagues, Jess Jackson and Amina. Thank you for keeping me audible. So for CanRenew, so we're looking at community investments, which are defined as projects or programs that improve community life. So that could include economic development, health improvement, violence prevention, youth programs, legal aid, a variety of other types of projects. They do not, again, have to relate to cannabis. So an eligible community would be a geographic community where residents qualify as social equity applicants, or SEAs. An eligible organization is any group that invests in SEA communities, which would include nonprofits, federally recognized tribes, educational institutions, local governments, private businesses, community groups, or partnerships between different types of organizations in that list. All right, so this is our second year of funding in CanRenew, and this year we have $10.9 million that we will be awarding to projects in this program. And this year we are doing something a little different than our first year, where we are awarding funds in tiers. So recognizing that some of the organizations that would want to participate in CanRenew may not have had a lot of experience in administering state funding. And so we are adding a tier 1, which are awards in the amount of $2,500 to $10,000. So because it is a smaller amount, there are lower barriers to entry, and that will also give folks an opportunity to gain that experience in all of the pieces of administering a government. And then we have, similar to last year, we have our tier 2, which are grant awards in the amount of $50,000 up to $2 million. And so with the amount, we do have an enhanced level of risk assessment and monitoring as required by state statute. And so this is going to really enable organizations to implement larger projects than in tier 1. So a couple more details. So the duration of these projects are going to be up to 12 months. So starting June 30th, 2026 or earlier if possible, and must be ended by June 30th of 2027. So we will be giving competitive priority to organizations that demonstrate community support for the proposed investment, support for youth civic engagement, youth leadership, and or youth-led health education opportunities, as well as a history of successful community investments, especially in eligible communities. So eligible projects, we talked a little bit about this before, but just to really hit home that we are looking at projects that include things like economic development, which could be all sorts of things. We've seen things around
community gardening, job training, local business workshops. We might also see things related to housing or other economic issues. Violence prevention, so things that might include anti-bullying programs, early childhood visitation, restorative or transformative justice programs, etc. Civil legal aid across, whether that is expungement, tenants' rights, etc. Improving social determinants of health, so getting into some of that like healthcare, nutrition, transportation, again, housing, and then youth development. So if we're doing like mentoring programs, leadership training, arts and culture activities, a wide variety. And again, we are not limited to just these 5. We are also in favor of learning of other project opportunities. All right, so what expenses are eligible? So there's all kinds of things that you can spend this money on. So that includes equipment for the project, training, materials or curriculum, supplies, food, beverage, childcare for community meetings or trainings, rental space for trainings or workshops, promotional materials, consultant expenses, plan development for safe spaces, and of course, salary for implementation. So some things that are not covered, however, would be like your everyday operating expenses or infrastructure improvements. So we're not building new buildings or even adapting buildings. Any specific staff performance incentives or bonuses, no lobbying, purchase of land or buildings, again, pre-award costs. So any expenses incurred before you get a contract, those cannot be covered. There's a limit of administrative costs of 10%. And then finally, revenue generating activities. Now, I know there are other grants that are available for cannabis businesses, but we just want to put another point on this limitation. So although business startups, they may positively impact social equity applicants, CanRenew cannot be used for this purpose. So like projects could provide training, guidance, or resources to individuals, but it can't be used to start, operate, or expand a business. So any applicant whose primary goal is to secure funding for their own business should not apply. And we will be screening those applications out. Okay. All right, so what is our timeline? So we opened the application. It's over a week now. How time flies. On November 10th, and it will be open until January 12th at 4:30. So make sure to get that in before the end of the day. There will be a review period from January to February, and in mid-March is when we hope to announce awards, with activities beginning by June 30th of 2026, and those activities being complete by June 30th of 2027. All right, so with that timeline out of the way, let's talk about the application and what is included in that. So some of you all may have already read it, maybe you're highlighting it, maybe you've memorized it, but just as a quick overview, so we do have, your project description as well as contact and eligibility information, and your project narrative, which is really the most important that we will be looking at. So the majority of the scoring will be focused around organizational capacity and relevant experience, outreach and community partnership, and your project design methods and work plan. We will also be looking at your budget and any financial match that you have, as well as your strategies for performance and evaluation. Okay, we are going to walk a little bit through what's in there, but I'm not going to read the whole thing to you. So if you somehow got invited to this, registered for this, but didn't see where the documents came from, there is a lovely QR code here that'll bring you directly to our website where all of these materials can be downloaded. So we are again doing an online application. However, most of the documents, most of the responses will be in documents that will be uploaded. However, we know that sometimes with online forms, technology can sometimes go a little awry. And so we provided an application guide that will prepare you for those questions that are online, as well as what that online process looks like. Please use that to prepare, but don't upload it. We're not going to review it. If we see it, we're just going to, okay, that's great. But we are not paying attention to it. Okay. And so, like I mentioned, those online questions, those are primarily going to be your basic eligibility information and required attestations. Any of the more substantive materials will be uploaded. So with the online application, there's no need to create an account, but you will be able to come back to the application if something happens and you need to save it and come back. So that they will send you a link so that you can come back to it and finish it. All right, so walking through the application a little bit, we're just going to call out some high points. So we do have this time a data privacy acknowledgement and Tennyson warning that we ask you to sign before moving into the application. We just want you all to know what is happening with your data, who might have an opportunity to see it. I also think it's interesting that that any of the data you enter is saved in real time. So keep that in mind. All right. So when we go to the online application, page 3, this is unscored, but we're looking at basic contact information. So there is an opportunity to enter a point of contact that may be different than your authorized representative. So the person who signs contracts on behalf of the organization. So in very small organizations, this might be the same person, or you might have different people. It's not required, but it does help us to see also that there is like a separation of duties and oversight and ability to address any conflicts of interest. All right, so for eligibility, you must have federal and Minnesota tax ID numbers. If you have received state funding before, you should have a SWIFT profile ID number, but if you have not and you are awarded a grant, you'll need to attain one. So if you haven't received funding, you can just skip that question. You will need to report if an employee of your organization is married to an employee of OCM. So that won't exclude your application from consideration, but that OCM employee will not be able to review their spouse's grant application. But for the rest of the questions, if you are unable to respond true, your organization and your project is not eligible. Okay, and then page 5 of the grant request is really your summary or cover page of your grant proposal. It's not scored, but it is required and it's really important. So there's a brief description of your project. So just up to 250 characters. And so these are the descriptions that would be posted to the OCM website and shared in press releases if and when you are awarded a grant. All right, and then on page 6, you will see where you are able to upload all of those other materials. You'll also see links to download the templates that are used for that. Please note they're exactly the same on that other page that I shared previously. But just in case you're like, I didn't download that over there, it's still here. Got it. All right, and so this is an update from our application for last year. So we really want to be able to draw the connection for each of our projects from the purpose and the impact of each of the projects so we can tell that story to the legislature, to the public of how CanRenew projects are reducing harm. And I don't know about y'all, but I really like a good step-by-step process. So we've kind of broken it down in that way, where we are looking at first, who is the target community? How have they been harmed by cannabis prohibition? How will your project repair the harm that you identified in step 2? And then how many humans will be impacted, or your outputs? And how will the community be transformed as a result of the project? Or in other words, your outcomes. So walking through that a bit. So you'll see in step 1, so we ask if you are targeting various SEA communities, so including long-term residents of eligible communities, justice impacted individuals, so those would be those folks that either had the cannabis related offenses or were related to them, military veterans, as well as farmers who would also be impacted. So we ask that you check those boxes and then also let us know the specific geographic community, whether that's a neighborhood, a census tract, a city or town, county, region, statewide. So this is going to help us to ensure that CanRenew is targeting those communities most disproportionately harmed all across the state. Additionally, if you are targeting a specific cultural or identity experiential community with your project, please also share that information. All right, and then step 2 is where we ask about the harms that are experienced by the community in step 1. So OCM, we do have data, we have information, we have research about harms caused by cannabis prohibition across the state, but we want to know how the specific community that you have identified as your target community has been harmed by prohibition. And we ask that you back up your assertions with data. And so that can be quantitative or numbers, it could be or qualitative or a more narrative thing. It could be formal, like published research, or it could be something more informal, such as listening sessions with community members. Not everything has to be a journal article, but making sure that you're backing it up. It's not just like, this is what Heather thought of over the weekend. And that works. So making sure you're using data. I also frequently need to remind myself to take drinks of water, so I am going to do that. Perfect. Just in time for a commercial break about using data in project proposals. So, like I said, applicants are required to demonstrate that the strategies and expected outcomes to be used in their project are evidence or community-based best practices. And we have some definitions here. So that application should reference verifiable information coming from case studies, impact reports, tools, curriculum, processes, etc. So evidence-based is going to be those more formal research studies, and community-based is going to be some of that more informal, like the community itself has said, no, this is what works in our community. And where might you find that data? So for some of the more formal data, there's a good site that Minnesota Management and Budget has put out for finding and using evidence. There's a QR code here. We also linked it in the RFP application. All right. So moving on to the next step, talking about how are you going to repair the harm that was identified in step 2. So the statute does name those 5 project types that we've mentioned: economic development, social determinants of health, violence prevention, civil legal aid, and youth development. But there may be other kinds of projects that will accomplish those goals of repairing harm. We want to see that you're drawing a direct line from the harm identified in step 2 to why this project specifically will repair the harm experienced by this community. And again, we ask that you back up your assertions with data. All right, and then step 4 and step 5. So you often see these in any sort of program evaluation or funding proposal, but your outputs and your outcomes. So step 4 indicating like how many services or products and how many individuals will be impacted by your project. Like we recognize that impact looks different for direct services versus community event versus materials, but that information is going to help reviewers compare impact across those different project types. And then it's not enough to know how many, but also like, what is that impact? How will those services or products impact individuals and communities? And how will you know that you've had the impact that you intended? Okay. So that is the project design piece, but then there's also that like, what does that look like on a day-to-day basis, right? Beyond just the theory of the program, what is this going to look like on a day-to-day basis? Will those activities take place regularly throughout the grant period, or like once at the beginning, middle, end? Who is doing the activities? Basically, how are we at OCM going to be able to know that you are on track to complete the project, right? And then we expect that that is going to be tied to that project design as well as to your budget, right? Everything in this whole package should be connected. That was just a bonus slide. Great. And so once we understand what your project is, it's also really important to us to know that you have the experience to pull this off, right? So describing how your organization's mission, vision, and values align with CanRenew. Describing your organization's history of working with social equity applicant eligible communities, and if you've received any grants from any source for similar projects. So we also ask you to share a little bit about similar projects that your organization has implemented. So because organizations with experience in implementing community reinvestment projects will be prioritized. So you are also, in addition to being able to just like write about them in the blanks, you are also welcome to upload up to 5 work samples that will help tell the story of those projects. Please, 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 please. Relate those work samples to the descriptions indicating how they relate. Like a picture of somebody gardening is beautiful, but sometimes we need to know why we are receiving a picture of somebody gardening or whatever that is. So please share how those relate to your experience. We also do need a list of board members so that we can identify if there are any potential conflicts of interest, as well as any professional or lived experience that may be contributed to this project. We're also going to ask that you upload an org chart. That can be in any format you want. And being able to share if key staff members are brand new or have they been providing similar services or leadership for some time. It's also possible that key staff might bring professional or lived experience that they didn't get at your organization. So you might also include that information there. All right, so one of the next chunks that you'll be scored on is around outreach and community partnerships. So we're going to be asking you to describe your approach to engaging communities that are harmed by cannabis prohibition. So that it could include a whole bunch of things. Maybe it's like how you're going to communicate with people, right? Is that going to be engagement in person, virtual? Are you going to be using language services, any media partnerships, maybe social media, other things like that. How are you going to overcome barriers to being engaged? Or the barriers that community members face to engaging with programs. Okay. And also sharing about any community partnerships that you've developed in regards to this project and the communities they serve. Especially with this type of program where we are working to repair harm, that community trust is crucial. And so if you don't already, maybe you are the trusted organization, but even if you are not, how are you going to build that? How are you going to partner with other organizations that similarly have trust or have more trust than you do? We do not require letters of support, but we do strongly encourage them because we try to keep things as objective as possible with our community reviewers. And so having them to be able to know that either you are a trusted organization or you have done work to build those partnerships is super helpful. And then finally, performance and evaluation is 10 points. So again, with this, we'd want you to refer back to that impact that's described in step 5 of the project design template. Here is more to share about some of your data collection methods, like what data will you collect and from whom? When are you going to collect the data? Is that just going to be one time only or multiple times throughout the project? How will those data demonstrate success? And also, how are you going to use that data for continuous quality improvement, not just for reporting? Yes. And then finally, in Form A is an evidence of good standing and performance capacity as required by the state for all grants. And so that is your biggest form for this entire application. Once that's all complete, you'll be able to just upload that entire document into the online application. We're going to talk for a minute about some of the other forms that are required. One of them is really important, 15 points, looking at budget and matching. So we do have a budget template. Please follow the directions in the budget template because we are looking for if that budget is well defined. Does it align with your project objectives and scope? Are the budget items reasonable, necessary, and tied to the activities that you have in the other pieces? Are those costs reasonable and justified, right? And does it align with your project needs and priorities? So this is a document that, again, you can upload it into there. I just want to point out a couple more things about this template. So here's my little laser pointer. So you'll see that there's multiple tabs here. So like with this budget template, so this is broken down with things that are, it does math for you. That's the simple answer. And it funnels that all into other places that are going to ensure that it meets any requirements. There is also a second tab there that is matching funds. And so these are other non-state funds or in-kind contributions to your project. So again, matching funds are not required, but knowing that they are there helps reviewers understand both the other support for this project as well as the feasibility and likelihood that it will be able to proceed as proposed. Oh, there's also an example budget. If you're like, I've never done a budget before, I don't know exactly what they're looking for, there's an example. So there will be additionally some instructions on that first tab that are going to show you how to make that into a PDF because it is going to be a PDF that is uploaded into the online application rather than the Excel spreadsheet. All right, and then we have a bunch of fun forms that also need to be uploaded. And so you'll see a space on page 6 that's going to be like, oh, just put this and this and this and this. We're going to talk about a couple of questions that we tend to get about each of these forms. So keep these notes. So Form C is required for all applicants. Form D is required for Tier 2 applicants, those folks applying for funds that are 50,000 or more. There are also Form E is for nonprofit applicants and Form F for-profit applicants only. Form C, so this is an affidavit of non-collusion. We do not want an affidavit that you are colluding. We want that you are not colluding. So this document ensures that the applicant is the authorized signer. The proposal is independently created without colluding with other applicants and the proposal or non-applicants, and the proposal details remain confidential until officially open. So some people ask, does this mean I can't talk with partners? Because we are encouraging partnerships. We are really saying, yeah, of course, you can still have general discussions with potential project partners and request letters of support. Once you complete this, we do ask that because it is notarized, you're going to upload that scanned document, but then keep the original notarized copy on file. So you do need to have that available if we at any point request to see that. So Form D really has 3 different parts to it. So first, there is a certification that no principals, so people with access to those grant funds, have been convicted of a financial felony. The next part is certifying that their senior leaders, so we're generally talking CEO, executive director, board president, have not been convicted of the offenses that are listed in that form. And then finally, just as making sure folks know what's coming, we ask for those senior leaders to provide preliminary consent to undergo a background study upon being selected as a finalist. So those background studies will be conducted by an OCM paid vendor, and any irrelevant findings will not be shared with OCM staff. So additional information will be requested from each leader upon being selected as a finalist. And again, this is only required for Tier 2 applicants. So Form E, so with this, it's a certification around that is required for nonprofits. And if selected as a finalist, nonprofits will also need to provide some additional documentation as listed both on the Form E and on this slide. Similarly, for for-profits, having some certification here. In case you are a tribal nation or a local unit of government and you're like, where's my form? You don't have one. One fewer pieces of paper. All right, so some general tips for success, and then we will get to any questions that folks have. So we encourage you to use the application guide to prepare answers for the online questions and prepare all of your documents for upload. Please note that there are character limits. There are areas that require being concise. And also, just make sure you remember that this is a character limit and not a word limit. So each character, so each letter, punctuation, space. If you are anti-Oxford comma, this is your moment to shine. That was a grammar joke. I apologize. And then tell your story. So you are the expert in what your community needs. So we really want to see innovative projects that have a positive impact on communities that have experienced harm. We also encourage you to save often so that you can return to the application later if something does come up. So you might have noticed in that initial timeline, there is like a 2-month review period. You might be like, what is that? How long does it take to read proposals? Actually, it takes a while because we really want to involve community reviewers in that process and not just have it be OCM staff. So we recruit folks that have experience in implementing these types of projects, as well as other state employees and people who come from those impacted communities as well. So, but in that in between time, you might also see denial letters or pre-award letters sent to eligible finalists requesting additional information, as well as an organizational risk assessment and financial review before we send award letters to eligible grantees. And then finalize that work plan, budget, and grant agreement. So there's a lot of work that's going on behind the scenes between the time that the application closes, and you might see a press release saying, hey, here's who got an award. We are making sure to do all of our due diligence to ensure that funds are used appropriately. Maybe you saw this whole presentation, you're like, no, I don't want to apply, but I do care about this project. Like I mentioned, we do have a need for community reviewers. We do provide stipends. It is a commitment. The time commitment is generally reviewing about 8 to 10 applications, participating in a 2-hour discussion with the review committee remotely. So please think about scanning this QR code to find out more and signing up to become a community reviewer, or send it to folks from the community, but not from an applying organization, to participate as a reviewer. Oh, and a quick plug, we do also have a RFP coming soon for CanGrow. So again, that has 2 different components, a farmer loan grant, as well as a farmer training grant. Okay, that is the end of me talking at you.